I've been working with words in my art since day one. I've always loved writing. I came a little later to poetry, but I loved novels. I was there, you know, with Dickens, and I was there with G.A. Henty before that. And I found out Henry Miller used to read G.A. Henty as well. Poor old Henty, clean-cut writer of boys' adventures. And he produced Miller and me out of reading him. What can you do? Anyway, here's a little piece that I found cleaning up. And actually it's a lift off another writer. But I'm going to let you guess who that is. Each one kills the thing we love. The coward does it with a kiss, and the brave one with a sword. That was a lovely Irishman who went adrift. So that is not my writing, or it's slightly changed, but that is a beautiful Irish scholar by the name of Wilde with an E. So you were going to ask me a question.
Yeah. Now, just where are you from?
Where am I from? As I say, I do say that to some lovely girls when they ask me, and I say, I promise I am from Earth, this beautiful planet that we have the fortune to be on. I was born in a place called St Ives in Cornwall, the port of Ire, an Irish saint who came through in the 4th century from Ireland. The place that I was born is, the names are covered in saints, and they were mostly Irish voyagers come over with Christianity. The reason that I got there, though, was because of my dad, who had been 4 years in a German prisoner of war camp in the Second World War, and he got out and went back to his hometown of Leamington Spa, which is in Warwickshire, close to where the Bard was born, and he'd gone to a dance where my mother, who had worked in a munitions factory for those 4 years, met him, and they danced on the munitions factory floor and became, they decided to marry. My father had painted portraits in the prisoner of war camp on the Hessian bed pillow blankets, and he'd been looked after by a guy called Adrian, which is my name, who had been to Paris and had met Picasso and had been down in Cornwall. Cornwall at St Ives was the kind of second place at that time in Britain where artists went to, particularly visual artists. There were writers down there, but it was a great place. It was kind of primitive. They painted the fishing girls, they painted the fishermen. The light was exquisite there in Cornwall. So I ended up being born there because my dad got advised to go down there. That would be a place for him to be an artist. So that's where I started, St Ives. Incredible. Spent a lot of time on the beach, a lot of time running around the island, and at 5 years old, got my first Buffalo Bill annual and got introduced to Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull.
Well, did what brought you to America?
Beautiful girl.
Yeah. They'll do it every time, let's face it.
It was kind of crazy because I was with this beautiful girl who was actually born in New Zealand, but she'd studied at the Royal College in London, and I met her in Cornwall, and somehow she got pregnant. And
somehow.
And it was partly to do with me.
Was it an immaculate birth?
Yeah. I had to own up to it.
I'm sure you tried to pull that off.
And she sent me out to buy the tickets. She had decided in her heart or in her spirit that she wanted to actually go back home to have this baby, and home was a long way. It wasn't just across the road or in another county, it was fucking New Zealand. And I went out to buy the tickets and compounded the journey by, in those days you still had travel agents.
Yeah.
You may still have, but you certainly had them then. And I wandered into a wonderful travel agent's on the North End Road in London town, and this lady in there somehow convinced me, with not my money, this was not my money, by the way, for these tickets. I'd been, you know, given these expressly to get us to New Zealand, and I came back, and I still can remember the look we never married, but my girlfriend gave me when I said, I have bought them, yeah, and they're slightly different. We're going to New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and New Orleans.
Oh, okay.
And this was an amazing ticket this lady had convinced me to buy.
Wow.
And it allowed us to spend a month in America and fly on to New Zealand, all for, you know, she convinced me it was a very similar price than if we just flew to New Zealand. Mm. She was actually going on that flight herself, and she did, and I actually drank a few gin and tonics with her on the flight. So she was really, she thought it was a great idea. Anyway, that got us to New York. It got us, it got us to those four states, right? Those four cities. One of those cities being San Francisco. Then craziness took place, because whilst we were there, I met a friend of my father's who was an artist in El Cerrito, who had visited my dad in Cornwall. So, you know, we bummed a week of staying with them, yes? As we're talking, my girlfriend says, is there a college up there called Davis? And the guy says, yeah, it's a cool college. And it turned out that the guy who was the head of the department, a gentleman called Roland Peterson, had studied with my girlfriend, who was a well-known printmaker, and had taught him her way of making prints. So we phoned him up. And we went up there and we visited, and somehow we got teaching jobs out of that about a year later when we came back to from New Zealand. That's how I first got to America.
Well, talk a little bit about the creative process. I know everybody, this is something they always have in interviews, and it's so different for different people, and it's probably different for each piece. But you're a sculptor and a poet. Is there a different creative process for the two things?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
I would have to be honest about it and say, if I had to choose between the two, I would choose writing. For two reasons. One, it's not physical. You do not have to carry it all around, and I make big ass stuff. And I've deserted a number of pieces in my time. I mean, you know, they're living in Hades somewhere. That's one reason. And the other reason is, frankly, I find writing easier. I don't mean by that anything's easy. You've got to do it all the time. But
is it getting easier, or is it getting harder as you get older?
Easier.
Easier?
I would say easier because I do it all the time. I didn't used to do it all the time.
Yeah.
And that is just, you know, I know this is an old chestnut, but when people talk about inspiration, all you got to do is turn up. Because if you turn up, whatever you're doing, at some stage it comes in, that inspiration comes in. But if you're waiting for it, it's like maybe some people get it. I know people have passages where they don't do anything, but I would argue that's probably they need to do that. You know, maybe some people need downtime. I'm in my 70s now. I ain't got time for downtime anytime. But I do find writing easier.
Yeah.
Also because of ideas, Glenn. It's like we were talking about Thorn Crown.
Yeah.
You've already given me more ideas about that, and I relate to that, and I know a lot. No, I don't mean it in a big-headed way, but you know, I know about churches. I know about human beings. And it's easier for me to write it in than it is to paint it in. Some people are naturally visual. I wouldn't say I am. I would say I like the sound of words. I like the music of words. I was brought up on painting, and I went to school for painting. So I was in front of a life model for 4 years, and I've taught life drawing, and I enjoy it. But again, if I had to come down, if I was working with troubled youth or something, I'd rather teach poetry than painting. I can do both, but I'd rather do one. And I'm ready for the job if anybody wants to offer it at a very low price.
Well, yeah, you've taught. I mean, you've got a background that I don't even know about.
I am a professor in hiding.
Oh, geez. Okay. I'll take my hat off. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that.
As long as it's only your hat. Yeah, I've taught in various universities in America and also in England, but I've had a very varied life. I was also in the Norwegian Merchant Navy, which I joined in that little down hometown of Casablanca there in Morocco. I went back to Cornwall and lived in Cornwall for 8 years, and I didn't do any art there, and I didn't write. I drank a lot. I played a lot of soccer, played a lot of cricket, was very physical, swam a lot, probably drank more than any of those, though.
I got a feeling you chased a few women, too.
I didn't, no.
No?
I was quiet. No, I was quiet.
Oh.
I lived with one lady called Natalia Nestorenko.
Oh, gee.
Who's incredible, beautiful Ukrainian Canadian, and behaved myself. And as I got older, I got worse on all that.
Are you basically happy? Are you happy now? I mean,
I don't know that I would say that. It would be nice to say it, but to be truthful, I have some. I don't want to bore people. I have some health anxieties,
yeah.
and they do make me a little anxious. They have made me more trying to finish what I'm doing,
Yeah.
just in case I happen to be signing up a little early for the big sleep and about to kick the bucket. I don't have a fear about death. In fact, I think it's a fucking good idea. And I'm not an afterlife person, but that's it. The mystery is the mystery. I mean, you know, I do not have the answer. I'm very sorry, but I don't. I'm interested in various religions, but I am not anything.
Yeah.
And I'm not agnostic either. I'm open. I'm free. I'm not an intellectual in that sense, and I'm not really, in that way, a deep thinker. I'm glad to be alive. I'm not philosophical. I like to just be. This may sound pretentious. I like to be real, whatever that is. I mean, everybody would say, "Yeah, well, we're all real, aren't we? There ain't no choice." But, and I do read a lot. It's like my dummy or my nurture.
Yeah.
If I'm not sure what to do, I read. Boredom I've never had it except when I'm waiting in a line for something that is badly organised. I don't like that. That gives me the horrors, because it's like, you know, you see that eagle up there, or that robin, or nothing. They don't get bored unless they're captured. And so I don't. Sometimes we get captured.
When did you start writing? At what age? At what age did you start writing?
You know, you brought into my head two teachers. They do it.
Oh, yes, yes.
And one was Mr. Guthrie. He threw a cannonball at me.
Ooh.
A real cannonball. That went through the...
There's not a real bore involved with this.
the Civil War cannonball.
Oh, my God.
Which was incredible down in Cornwall. Anyway, you know, our Civil War was before your Civil War.
Oh, I didn't think about that. But
Yeah, Oliver Cromwell's
we
Civil War.
tend to think here in America we're the only ones that had a civil war. You know, I mean, I didn't think about that.
We beat you by 120. We beat everybody, and then we got a king and queen again.
Oh,
Give me a break. We didn't, you know. We had a Lord Protector, a giant condom. Anyway, Mr. Guthrie was the history teacher. I liked history. So I think that's what first, apart from him throwing the cannonball at me, it just misbehaving in the back row. Four of us, you know, and I was on the outside. Cannonball went past my ear and through, we had that kind of, it wasn't sheetrock, it was that soft stuff, you know. And he went through it into the, he made me go and get it. I thought that was pretty cool. Frost, go and pick up that. I never told anybody about it because he might have got fired. But he was a lovely man. He was an educated man. He just lost his temper that time. He had a red beard. That could help. And the other guy was Mr. Jones, Dorval Jones, a Welshman who came to the school when I was in my second year. So I'm about. We don't do grading like you do. So it's just 1, 2, 3, 4. First year, second year, third year. So in the second year he came. And I remember he organized a troupe of actors to come to the school. That had never happened before. And that was extraordinary, Glenn. That girl who played, it was Oliver Twist.
Oh.
And the girl, the red-haired girl who played Nancy in this one, right? That was my first, well, it may have been early ones, but that was when I first remember being intoxicated by a female form. And it was in our gym, and our gym teacher was a bastard. He used to hit the last three who came in with a slipper, still with the fucking prongs. The prongs were out of it, but they still had that indention. And he'd hit the last three, and me and myself and Peter Rowe and Jimmy Hocking always were last on purpose. We were not going to be intimidated by him, right? So I had some corporals of punishment. But anyway, it was, so I was used to that gym being, you know, and you must have done it. You go over a horse and all that, you know, the gym of the old days, right? And climb up the ropes. I was never any good at climbing.
I'd go under the horse when nobody was looking.
I'm not surprised. And they did Oliver Twist on the stage where always before, all we'd ever seen was gym equipment or the headmaster in those days, not the principal, get up and make a rather boring talk, or, you know, like it was always like that. And then suddenly, I tell you what they were like. They arrived like they do in Hamlet, like, you know, in Hamlet, the theatre people come in the first act and kind of brilliantly help develop the play of Hamlet by doing their own play, which Hamlet manipulates. Well, it was like that because we had our own thing going on, and it was so strong, this little Cornish school I was at, and then suddenly these people, and they may have been from Cornwall, I didn't know any of them. And they bought Charles Dickens. Oliver Twist is brilliant. I mean, you know, Dostoevsky loved Dickens. Tolstoy even, who didn't love anybody, loved Dickens. We've kind of underrated him sometimes, made him like it's sentimental. And I said, fuck him and read him. He is superb, and what he does in that story is incredible. Um, anyway, of course, Nancy is killed in it, and that completely finished. You know, because she gets murdered by Bill Sykes, and I'm watching that on the stage in this school where everything had been about, quite frankly, boring education. I was not a good student. I would always be looking out the window, looking at the blue sky, and not sitting in the box. I used to get hit in the math class as well. We're not very good at that. But Dorval Jones bought. It is important to use his name because he came from the same place as Dylan Thomas. He came from Swansea, and he loved Dylan Thomas. He loved his work. He brought a culture into the school that had not been there. Before you learned Shakespeare because everybody learned Shakespeare. But he brought this love in. He wasn't sentimental. He wasn't like a romantic poet. I watched that play, and that transformed me. That girl was beautiful, and she got killed, and they did that brilliantly because you can actually see her, which is a good idea because we'd have all fainted. I mean, it's and the guy who played Bill Sykes was fantastic. He was only about 18. These guys were all, I think they came from somewhere like Exeter. They'd come from a college. They were all students, so. And utterly enthusiastic, and whoever taught them was really, their director was great. Anyway, I'm going on about it, but I hadn't thought about it before until you asked me. Even though I had a father in my family who was being creative. My father was, when he came home, he did not talk art. My mother was a very beautiful, strong, I don't want to be rude, Mum, I may have got it wrong. I don't remember her reading a book, and I certainly never remember her discussing one. So we didn't discuss, and my dad, he read and he illustrated poems and stuff. Well, illustrated, no, he did drawings later in his life that were from Goya's, not Goya. Goya is a painter, not a poet. I can't remember. The poet's not coming to me straight away. Anyway, the poet that was murdered by Franco. But our house didn't have. It wasn't middle class. They were both working class. My parents. My dad had beautiful hands. I mean, he did, and he had a great art talent that got discovered by going to the war. Well, before that, he had drawn in his school, but he left school at 13. You know.
Isn't it strange the way things bring
Right.
art out that you don't expect, like his experiences in the war? I mean, you know.
Yeah. Well, as he always said, that was his university. You know, I like I say, I was named for Adrian Heath. Look, fancy rear fucking gunner. Adrian Heath, rear gunner, born in Bombay. Upper middle class. Didn't speak like my dad or me now, spoke more like that. Hello, Adrian, how are you doing? Things going okay? You know, upper class.
Yeah.
Who thought that when you were captured, you had to. He escaped 4 times. 4 fucking times.
So wonder they didn't shoot him.
Well, yeah. Well, the third time they brought him in, they were. But you know, it's a terrible thing that the Holocaust was going on at the same time. But those people in the prison camp that my father were in, they were under the Geneva Convention. They didn't work. They not only did they not get put in gas chambers, you know, my father paid it because he had time. And and they didn't starve to death. I mean, it wasn't great. Don't get me wrong.
You
My dad was
it wasn't
rail.
like summer camp.
Yeah. My dad was rail thin, but he met this guy who had met Picasso, and not only that, supported him painting portraits, which is, and Adrian was already an abstract artist.
Yeah.
But he'd gone to the Slade. He knew how to draw. He'd done all that. He didn't say you shouldn't be doing that. He just said that's looking pretty good. You could maybe you want to do. Just totally supportive.
Yeah.
And in fact was the guy that got him into art school later, like a GI Bill thing. So where are we going with this? The people are in the midst of the worst. You can pull out the best. I'm not trying to be philosophic about it either. People show great kindness. It's kind of handy if you've got talent. I mean in a sense, not of it can't be done unless you've got talent, but you've got to love it, and you've got to want it. My dad wanted it bad. I mean, his first show, he hitchhiked up to London. He got this painting in the Grosvenor Gallery. The Grosvenor Gallery is still going, and it was a gallery that had paintings in it since the late 1800s. Whistler showed there. Turner. So my father got a painting in there, and he was like, "Wow!" Right? He was this guy from Nowheresville, and I remember him telling me the story. Fucking hitched up is 350 miles from St Ives to London.
Okay.
He got about halfway up. It's getting dark. Looks like it's going to rain, and he slept in a haystack. Got off the road somewhere in Dorset, boy, and slept under that haystack. Brushed himself off. Got a ride in the morning, and he goes into. He gets into the middle of London, and he goes to see that first painting. Because now, the story that I remember that he told me about that was he couldn't find his painting, and he thought it wasn't shown, but it was. And when he found it, it was next to another artist whose name's gone from me now, but he said that other artist's work outshone his piece. It was 2 lemons on a red plate, but they were painted superbly. And his looked like a washed east. What did he say? It looked like mine had been left out in the rain. but I guess how I got to that story was what it did was instead of being but he learned his lesson from that, and he decided nothing would go out in public again unless it was gonna knock somebody out in the second round. He didn't want to go the distance. He wanted to, and he learned from that.
You touched on something. I've noticed that you need a combination to be an artist. It seems talent is not enough.
No.
Talent isn't enough in itself. I mean, you need talent to really. Well, I've seen untalented or people that I thought were untalented who got really good breaks. But usually they get found out after a while, But talent isn't enough, is it? What kind of advice would you give to somebody that's 15 and starting to write or whatever?
Well, I think it's listen to your inner voice. What you love, what you dream, what you feel. Don't be put off by anybody or anything. That's one thing. I mean, somebody like Picasso, his daddy was a painter. His father was the professor. He didn't come from nowhere. But in fact, he had to draw the pigeon's feet on his father's paintings. That's what, like when he was 4, his father said, did you finish the bottom for me, Pablo? All lessons, but you you've got to believe in your dream. That's really hard. That's easy to say. That's really hard because you could be a waitress. You got to do all these things, but you can do them all if. Okay, I saw the wonderful, I think, Charles Bukowski, poet, right? I just saw him before you came. I saw a little video somebody had sent me, and he he didn't like doing poetry readings, but he got paid, and so he would do them. But he would insult the crowd. I mean, the crowd would jeer at him, and he'd jeer him back, and he'd say, yeah, and he would drink while he was on the stage, and and he said, fuck off and all that, and go home. He was a piece of work. He was a good poet. But he worked for 10 years in the post office. Yeah. Right? So in this piece that he's walking along the street being filmed before he goes into the poetry thing, because he got famous by then and they're shooting him. And he says, I walked up this street a lot of times. I know LA. He's not talking poetry, he's just saying, I know this motherfucking street, I delivered on it. And he knew all of LA because he wasn't a deliverer all the time. He had to make them up. That's hard work. I mean, I don't know if you know, but you've got to get it all in the right box, right time. You can get fired and all that. It's not just, I work at the post office. But for the last 3 years, he was a deliverer. So he did all LA. Or lots of it, and they'd get sent different places, so he knew it. And there's that element as well, that I guess what I'm trying to say is some people become artists at 18 and they don't do anything else, and that's okay, but some people don't. Conrad, the great Conrad, was a ship's captain, and became a writer. There's not an answer to it. Yeah. I've had a strange track. The person that I haven't mentioned, that I have to mention, there isn't any of her work right here. It was the lady that I married, which was neither of the two beautiful ladies that I had children with. I wasn't married to, but the lady that was having a baby and died in a car crash was who I was married to, and I met her when I was teaching at Davis. Second time I went back, she was a graduating student and I was a visiting professor, and we fell in love and we got married in New York City, and she was incredible. Now she had talent, huge talent. The fucking unbelievable. Her father, who was not an artistic person at all, was a lawyer, a union lawyer. So he knew all the rules, and he had an incredible memory. I can say that. He said, your Queen Mother's got one of his. The girl was called Jan, my wife. Got her pig in her, in her own special gallery, and Jan had drawn this pig when she was fucking 12 and entered it for this competition, and it ended up with the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother then was the mother of this queen, who's lasted a long time. Anyway, she could draw with her left hand, not looking at the figure, better than I could draw with my right hand looking. She was totally talented. She went to FIT for fashion, and so she got taught how to draw you with, like a fashion page for New York Times. She could do all that, but that's not what she wanted to do. She was an extraordinary artist and thinker. Now, she was an intellectual, deep thinker, great concern about America and all the bad things it does, as well as the good things. I don't want to be negative, but what it is. And she would go after that. Great writing, great painting, but only using the painting not as an as a search for something, as a way of bringing something out of the ether that worried people, that they weren't quite sure what was happening. She was a very provocative, brilliant artist. I was very lucky to meet her, and she's affected me strongly in how I behave. So I had a dad who did really well, and was a great painter. But then I met this woman who could take things that were political and make them artistic, and make, and in performance and in all that, could trouble people with her mind. And she was utterly fucking fearless, way braver than me. We'd go into places, I'm 6'4", you know, and there's plenty of me, and she would just be fearless in her courage to do what she was going to do. So that's another thing to say to people. If you have that, I didn't have that courage. I just didn't have it. I mean, I think although she didn't like her dad, and there was a lot not to like about him, he had this utterly, he would go to the heart of the matter. When he was in court, he would kill the opposition. And he could remember what everybody said, which is very, you know, he had a photographic memory, so he'd turn around and say, "But you just said, come on." She didn't exactly do that, but she had a, she was Aries, 27th of March, and wicked, intellectual, and could draw like Picasso's sister. So I've been lucky. I've been around people like that. And I am interested, it's one of the wonderful things about working with you, and which is so fantastic, is you again, you've got this talent. I mean, you're great on the visual, but you have this, you see a story quickly, and you put it together quickly, and you're not embarrassed, or it just comes out. That idea you had about that noise going up into the chapel was brilliant, because it happened. And we all know the cross, but we also know they tried.
But then again, I didn't associate it like you did with the cross being carried, you know, and it was like, oh gee, it all fit together, you know. And I guess inspiration is another thing I want to ask you about. Inspiration, I mean, it goes along with what you're talking about, though.
Look, I'll show you how I cheat. I'm going to give this all away now.
All right. Pay attention, folks.
Do not be afraid to... I'm overusing on Picasso, forgive me. There are brilliant women artists, a lot of whom have not been brought out yet still. So my wife, she's not my ex-wife in that sense, we never exed, but what he said was, you can, I don't know, I don't want to misquote this, but you can take from other artists, and it's not stealing, I would say. It's a homage, right?
Yeah.
It's a homage. This is Oscar Wilde. I would all say that. Don't speak. Remember, it happened once. It can happen again. How glad you'll be that I waked you. This is James Joyce in the book that nobody reads, Finnegan's Wake. It's this exquisite writing. Leave your troubles behind. We will take our walk before they ring the earthly bells. Darkness will cover us. We're safe now. Something then, somewhere there, I wrote my hopes and buried the page when I heard thy voice. My sweet things, Was thy poor loves abandoned by the whole wide worldly? My sweet thing, did no one in the whole wide world return your love? Then with a knife, like a stark, swashbuckling compassion, he takes the child across the doorstep of desire. This is what people haven't read it still. It's exquisite. It's also very painful because he had a beautiful, Joyce had a beautiful daughter who ended up in a lunatic asylum. And there's great grief in it as well. So when I'm writing and I'm trying to write about something that really matters, especially as I'm getting there, as I'm on the trail, I could be in the old grave very soon. I mean, I'm not saying, but it does suddenly occur to you, you know.
Yeah,
you have to go to the hospital and they look at it and you think, fuck,
Yeah.
man, I'd never, you know, I've always run and swam and all that. You have to be able to run to get down the husband's lamppost and get, no, I'm joking. So why do you keep fit? Say, you know I need to keep fit. But you can, I tell you what happens with me, Glenn. I write things down. These are files that you're supposed to put your poems in. But I write on them because it's beautiful, hard card, and I like my hand. So it is physical. And when I write it, when I take it from something, that writing goes in my blood. If I write it, I take, you know, I can remember all those classes I didn't take notes in. But if I write it down, that in itself is a transference of energy from somebody's brilliance. So any poetry that I love, my bed is kind of clear today because I had to have it right for the inspection. I haven't slept in the fucking thing for 3 days because the inspection got put off. But I usually have a book by the side of my bed and these. And anything that I love, I make myself write it down. Now that can be my own poetry. But it can also be anything. I've been reading George Eliot, which is a male name, female.
Yeah. And
Middlemarch, I could never read it. I'm not, the Victorian period, you know, it's like, oh, fuck. It was such a, to me, such a uptight period. Yeah, there was some great things happening, but it was such a, you know, the women are all, you know, everybody's tied up, you're not allowed to have sex, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But she writes exquisitely and brilliantly, and I had no idea that she originally was a science writer, and that, you know, so she wrote this fiction, but she broke out of being a science writer, really, when science, not when science was being discovered, but, you know, the origin of the species and all that had just come out, and she was writing newspaper articles about that. And then went creative. Then started writing amazing novels that have women heroines in them. So there is also the point. You haven't asked me this, but I think you've kind of the way you've been. It's what's encouraging me to speak to you about this is there is also therapy involved in this because if you write, I mean, I'm writing this is about a girl, right, who gets lost, who has a father figure, James Joyce, who was probably the world's most famous writer on a certain level, English writer, and you suddenly find out this book that everybody talks about is a masterpiece that nobody's read. That was kind of, but is also a book that's dealt with the dream world and imagine, well, this amazing lady, Jewish lady, so often, I don't know what it is with that incredible race, but there's an exquisite brilliance of Freud, you know, I mean, they're fucked, man, the brain power, and I've been lucky, I've been around some folk from that I don't like to talk about race in a racial way, in that
Yeah,
way,
yeah.
but I've been around folks with that background, and it's incredible. You're like, wow. Don't say anything unless. No. Great senses of humour, great generous heart, very, often very left. I'm not saying, but very about the people. What he's writing in the end here, the River Liffey, and going back into the world, into the river. There's lots more that can be said about Joyce than what I can say about him. But it is about his relationship with his daughter and how he tries to transform what actually happened, or some of the disasters that he died. Really, before she went into that final thing, it was the rest of the family that had her put there. Her brother, really. But this is the bit that I forgot. I know I've gone on long. We're going to have to edit it. But here's the bit. Here's the bit. Here's something that's happened to me that I haven't been able. I may be wrong. That I haven't been able to do with painting that I can do with writing. This is it. He took what had happened and rewrote it. Not a fantasy, another reality. And so I've suddenly realized my main story is called the Furies, and the Furies are Greek, and really a female anger, retribution against unnecessary killing, usually in war, and certainly not keen on matricide and the killing of children, rather against it. I've used that. I have Aphrodite, goddess of love. I have Kali, who wears her lovers, who turn up in my story, but they see themselves, they're shrunken skeletons round heads round her neck.
I dated her sister, I think.
Yeah, she's phoned me up about you. You're expected. What you do is you see your old self on her ebony throat. It's the death of ego, not the death. It's not an execution. You have to stop trying to manipulate this love. Anyway, what I think, okay, this is it. So, I have a karaoke bar in the stories, okay? So it's all under a bridge. That bridge we were going to visit, it's the Osage. It's 10 minutes from here. Where the turtles are, where the blue jays are, where the kingfisher is. They're all there. They are there. Are you there now, boys? We're coming in. Anyway, they are there. The buzzard hangs, the fish swim, the swallows come and all make those incredible nests, right?
Oh yeah.
And the birds can't see. Those young birds, I didn't realise that. I looked that up, but they can't see, and so it takes something like 3 weeks for them to become able to see, and they're only there for that long, and then they go back to South America.
Oh Jesus.
So, but they come. And they inhabit the space. One of the things that I haven't been able to write very well, and I just go everywhere to steal it. I mean, I assure you, I go to Thomas Hardy. He wasn't as good as I love Hardy, but I thought he was a great landscape writer. But I'm trying to steal bits, you know. And what I do is I steal it and then I turn it upside down, so you wouldn't know. So where it ends, I begin. And I actually was taught that by a Canadian poet. Older lady. She said, I like your poem, but I'd like it better if you did it upside down. Interesting, because she makes you finish your beginning. And you get that, because you could do that with a film sometimes. You suddenly go, stop, do it, give it all away right at the beginning, and then narrow down to how it got fucked up. Anyway, something like that. That's the totality of my script writing. But what you can do is bring things that were lost or missed or became unhappy, and recharge them with your fiction, with love. This is very short. Instructions for the chorus, okay? And that's how I write. I mean, they go in notebooks. I'm just going to read it.
Yeah.
So the chorus, Glenn, turns up at Loki's bar. Loki's is a bar run by Carly. Aphrodite's still having to do tricks to keep the whole thing going. And then somebody exactly like you,
a trickster,
a Native American Heyoka, right, which is a trickster, and he sits at the table, he wears a hat like yours, only backwards, and he's got his hair with an eagle feather braided in it, right? Yeah? And what he does is he runs the films. So, and usually what happens is I have activities take place, and it's streamed live onto the karaoke stage, right?
Yeah.
And they give free food for the chorus. So if you come to turn up as the chorus, you'll get free food and drink. Well, the people who turn up are a right bloody crew. I've known quite some people in my time, and I'm quite some people. They turn up and they get drunk, and they're in the chorus. They're supposed to say the right things, but they say the fucking wrong things. Like, you know, cod pieces and stuff, right? So they say, well, what kind of size cod piece is that? He's bragging again, and all that. They make these asides, and the chorus is organised by On Your Marks, Karl Marx, because it's his kind of punishment for societal organisation, because look what's happened. Everybody's on the run and they're coming back. He's also lovely, he's kind, and of course he was a poet before he wrote the Communist Manifesto. Here we go. Instructions for the chorus. You sing this like a sea shanty. You sing it like a Buddhist hymn to oblivion by Tom Waits at a Captain Beefheart. You sing it like Robertson Jeffers on acid. You sing it like a happy Lenny the Bruce. You sing it like Lady Gaga sang it to Sylvia Plath as she turned the gas off. You sing it like Amy Winehouse sang it when she refused to go back to black. So what happens there is there's two poets in there, right? Three poets, really. Lenny Bruce may have been our greatest contrary poet storyteller. I think he was extraordinary. So he's in it, being happy. You know, he died broken-hearted. Amy Winehouse is not going back to black. Her best song, no. And Sylvia Plath put her head in a gas oven, and she is represented by Lady Gaga, and she's not going to put her head in the gas oven. So you can, with poetry, you can do that. And then you've got your chorus. So what it means is they come back from the dead. And if I was doing it in film, they'd walk onto that stage and they're singing, and you're not sure. It's like a mist. It's liminal. You're going between two realities. So although I don't, I don't think. I try not to think, and I don't think. So there's a liminal wall that you can drift through. That poem we first did together was of a fucking 6th century poet who bit the ass of the guy who killed his wife when he was dead. Yes. And killed him. I mean, poisoned him so his genitals fell off.
That's great.
I mean, so you can do it with your head cut off. You can certainly I'm not rewriting history.
Yeah.
If somebody reads that in 100 years' time, I mean, maybe not. You know, if it's translated, they'd say, "Ah, that's that Amy Winehouse. She's back. She's in the chorus." Originally, the Greek chorus was actually the play. They were the players, they were the music, they were the everything. You know, then it became the chorus in a song and all that. But my guys turn up, so I can pull any. I have got a 12-year-old girl who had to murder her father in Africa because the fucking guy said, if you don't kill him, we're going to kill you and your sister. Right? That's child soldiers. I have her. She turns up and sings her song. Do you see? So it's kind of crazy karaoke, right? It's not, but it turns out when you look up what karaoke means, it originally was actually a spiritual activity. You weren't just miming a popular song. And it's been going on in Japan for something like 400 years. And also in Japanese no, I may be pronouncing this absolutely ghastly, in Japanese no poetry, I thought I'd invented this thing of Amy Winehouse and all that, right? No, of course not. They bring people back who were in bad situations and retell their story and bring them alive to comment on it. So in a way, it's a form of sophistication, if you see what I mean. It's like saying, okay, Stalin may have shot that great writer, which he did, Isaac Babel, my favorite, one of the great writers of all time, shot through the fucking head in a gulag because he made some feisty remark about the leader. But you can bring him back, not only with his literature, but by reading it. And I honestly, I hope I'm not sounding racist. Isaac Babel was about 5'4", wore glasses. I mean, I'm saying 5'4" and I'm tall, as though that's something, and it's so rude of me. But anyway, not very tall, Jewish, going bald already, loved the girls, though, and he joins a Cossack fucking regiment in 1960 when all the fucking Cossacks are 8'6". And he somehow manages it, Glenn.
Oh, gee.
And he joins them, and they come to like it. And he writes about that, but he doesn't write. He made me laugh. I fell out of the bed laughing. He's not sentimental. He's brave with it. He was fucking brave to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know where I'm going with this. That there are plenty of ways to be creative, and there aren't any rules. You can go in the library and steal anything, but you can remake it, and you can say who you got it from. I'm sure, you're not going to tell me Beethoven.
It's always best to, because otherwise somebody else will bring it up. So you just as soon say, of course, I know this is a
you say,
homage to.
Or I curated this. They got these fancy words now.
Because you can tell they're getting ready to say it. It reminds me of. No, I know this.
This, for instance, this one. Mm-hmm. May the bright cloak of happiness shelter you from the blue rain of despair, right? There's the two figures, there's the male and there's the female, the two signs. Mm-hmm. Although somehow I'm going to have to repaint the female because I went over with that tape. Found that out. This is a beautiful old drawing. Guess where I got those lines from?
Where?
It's a fucking Cherokee love charm.
Oh, okay.
Right? You can see, I can just see you, Glenn, turning up with your camera. Right? I take a nice picture of you and your flute. Yeah. And you say, this will bring you happiness and it will shelter you from the blue rain. It's a love charm. It's what you sing to the girl that you're gonna. And I found that because I was part of a wonderful school called the Academy that walked for 2 months the Appalachian Trail, and the class just did it, and that was something else.
Okay.
2 months, and I discovered that saying in a book. I don't know, somebody left a book in one of those amazing shelters. It was pissing down with rain, and I wrote it down, and then that painting is like this one. That's a drawing I did in the library. The library it was the library that was a prison when Mae West was there. Because there's somebody else who was incredibly creative and was jailed. You know, when the maid comes in and says, Miss West, there's 21 men in your room, and she says, tell one of them they'll have to leave. I mean, it's brilliant, isn't it?
That is.
And this was drawn in that library, and it has beautiful Greek saying, and it's on top of a map of stocks and shares. You know.
That's wild.
And that was done when the library had to be my studio. I was living in somebody else's studio. They would let me sleep on their couch, but I was not allowed to make any fucking art in there, which seems fair enough. I'm not being rude about that. I had to get out when the sculptor came in, but I lived there for 2 months, just off Canal Street, right down there at the bottom of New York. And I loved New York, and I still do love New York City. I think we've done. Have we done?
Yeah, we're done.